Hi, I'm Jennifer Solotaroff. I'm a senior social development specialist in the gender group of the World Bank Group, and I'm a co-author of the 18th edition of the Uganda Economic Update. I'm going to be giving a presentation on part 2 of the update, which is about improving women's economic empowerment. This means closing gaps between men and women in economic outcomes and decision-making. Bringing women more into the center of the productive economy will bring a stronger and faster economic revival. Even before the COVID-19 pandemic shock, Uganda already had lost an estimated 61 billion US dollars due to gender inequality. Gains that women had made in labor force participation rates a decade ago, which were among the highest rates in the region, have been erased. Bringing women's earnings to match men's would increase national wealth by almost 12%. Not investing in women deprives households and the economy of the contributions women would make and constrains its transition out of agriculture. Following the first lockdown in March of 2020, more women than men had to stop working, especially young women, and most of all, urban women, 37% of whom reported a work stoppage. Gender inequality in workforce participation, which had been increasing since 2013, thus became even worse in 2020. Not only have more women than men been pushed back into agricultural production, more women than men have had to backslide into poverty level or subsistence agriculture and further away from wage employment. Women are now about 50% more likely than men to want employment, but not be able to look for jobs or obtain them. Young women encounter more hurdles than young men in completing their educations and successfully transitioning from school to work, especially to wage employment. Girls are generally more likely than boys to not attend school or to drop out of school because of pregnancy or family pressures to stay home and perform unpaid care work. When some schools reopened in 2021, 17% of girls did not return, compared to only 11% of boys. The biggest difference in boys and girls' reasons for not returning was teen pregnancy, which kept more than 1/4 of these non-returning girls out of schools that did reopen. When girls do stay in school, they're far less likely than boys to acquire the skills that get them jobs that pay well and are sustainable, such as in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM fields. Male students far outnumber female students in the TVET institutes that train for higher skill and higher paying jobs. Another gender gap in economic outcomes is in ownership of family assets, especially land. In Uganda, women are much less likely than men to own land, both in formal and informal or customary land ownership. The parcels of land they do own tend to be smaller than those men own. This is one reason why female farmers are not as productive as male farmers. When women own the land they farm, they tend to be just as productive as men. Closing the gender gap in agricultural productivity could increase GDP by 0.42%, which could raise 119,000 people out of poverty. One reason why women own less land is that Ugandan law does not guarantee their equal rights to inherit family property, and they inherit less land. Current efforts to amend the succession law are underway, fortunately. If and when female surviving spouses and children are guaranteed the same inheritance rights as male surviving spouses and children, everyone will need to be educated about these rights, because very few people are aware that gender equal inheritance rights can be protected. Women's lack of owned land also means that they don't have the main traditional form of collateral that is required to secure loans from banks and other formal financial institutions. Most of these institutions do not have alternative means of assessing and approving women's creditworthiness. Women's lower use of formal financial services is the main way in which they remain financially excluded in Uganda. They are more likely than men to rely instead on informal financial services. The good news is that women have doubled their rates of borrowing from formal banks since 2016, from 5 to 11%. This still lags behind men's share of 20% borrowing from banks. Gender gaps in credit from formal financial institutions, which tend to give larger loans than informal institutions, is a key determinant of gender gaps in entrepreneurship. It's not that women aren't as eager and capable as men of being successful entrepreneurs. In fact, they're highly entrepreneurial, and Uganda is one of the few countries in the world to have achieved gender parity in entrepreneurial activity. But because of specific constraints on their growth-oriented entrepreneurship, women business owners cluster in informal micro-enterprises in lower profit sectors. Among all small and medium-sized formal businesses, less than 30% are owned by women. Gender gaps among young entrepreneurs have grown under the pandemic. More young women had to close their businesses compared to older women and men of all ages. Even before the pandemic, women's enterprises averaged 30% lower profits than men's. This profit gap is related to women entrepreneurs' tendency to cluster in lower profit sectors and, as we've seen, access smaller loans, which is largely because there's no law that prohibits lenders from discriminating against women. Women also lack the access to technology, market information, and business networks that male entrepreneurs tend to enjoy. Research shows that by closing gender gaps in these areas, women entrepreneurs can be just as productive and profitable as male entrepreneurs, especially when they cross over into male-dominated sectors, such as automobile maintenance and sales, construction, electricity and gas supply, metalworks and engineering, and transportation. When Uganda can meet the aspirations of growth-oriented women entrepreneurs, the much greater productivity and profits that result will increase household incomes and push the economy ahead into a faster and stronger recovery. Thanks, and over to you, Margarita.
Thank you, Jen. My name is Margarita Puerto. I'm a senior social development specialist working on gender inclusion in the Ugandan country office. I'd like to summarize key messages from the report that we would like also to bring to the table to enable this discussion and support for women economic empowerment in Uganda. One of the key findings, but also important message that we want to convey today is about keeping girls in the school, because that will also enable a more smooth transition from the school to jobs and access to the more profitable sectors for women. That transformation, the support to a more industrialized economy will also depend on women participating more actively in these sectors and having opportunities for skill development and opportunities for education for girls is the first step. Secondly, we want also to make a strong argument for investing in interventions that ease women's unpaid care work responsibilities and create more time for their wage employment or entrepreneurship. This is something we have seen everywhere else in the world. The importance and the cost also of the domestic work in terms of participation in the labor market. Helping women to ease this burden or ease this responsibility is an important aspect also to enhance their economic participation. Another important angle is related to land rights. Land is an important aspect for access to credit, but it's also an important aspect for women participating in the agriculture sector and agribusiness. So addressing this in a more comprehensive way and making sure that there are reforms that are supporting women, that are enhancing their participation and their access to land is an important aspect that the report is also showing with a lot of evidence and clarity. An important element that has been discussed and that also we found out from the study is on financial literacy among women and increase their access to formal financial services. We see women participation in a lot of informal mechanisms and low structures, like low-cost credits for women at the community level, but it's important also that these women have access to large amounts of credit and that they can also make a transition from a small to medium businesses. Meet women demand for more credit and also growth-oriented enterprises needs to be supported by enhancing the legal environment that reduce the discrimination for women in access to credit, and also promoting more alternative mechanisms to establish women creditworthiness. So these aspects about the barriers that women have in participating in economy are key recommendations that we look forward to keep supporting and working close with the Ugandan government to make sure a better and a stronger participation of women in the recovery of their economy. Thank you very much.